James Mitchell here, and in this video I'm continuing my series on Howard's Grand Tableau, this time focusing on another optional technique called knighting. So stay tuned. And here we are, once again looking at the cards that are in Howard's Grand Tableau. And the deck that's been assisting me in this series has been the Mystical Lenormand. It is by Regula, Elizabeth Fiechter, and the artwork is by Trösch. And if you're just joining me for this part in our series, Howard is a friend of mine who I did a Grand Tableau with some time ago, and he brought to the table his concern about his Akashic Records training and certification and moving that into a practice. And he at the time was working with potential clients, offering that as a service, and he was experiencing some difficulty. And so at the time we did the Grand Tableau, he was seeking information and guidance on how to move through that challenging time. So in previous segments of this series, I started with looking at the overall impressions of the Grand Tableau when I first laid it out. Then in the second part, I looked at the first 3 cards in the tableau to offer us some general advice. Then following that, I looked at the 4 corners because they tell the story, the overall story, in a snapshot, in a brief way. And then after that, I looked at the cards that were above the Significator. The Significator is a gentleman, in this case representing Howard, the client. Above him, behind him, below him, and ahead of him. And then in the last previous video, I looked at the optional technique called the diagonals, and we looked at the diagonals that were leading to the Significator. So we looked at the diagonals going this way, and we looked at the diagonal going this way, leading to him, and then the diagonal that was leading away from him, both on the upper side here and in the lower side. So that was the last video. And so the focus of this video is going to be another optional technique, and this one is called knighting. And knighting is a process that pairs 2 cards, one of them being the Significator. Again, this is just a way to kind of gain additional insight. The thing with these optional techniques that I really enjoy is that they sometimes can just offer a repeated message. So I think that is just as validating as getting a new insight, is getting more and more messages saying the same thing, but using these different techniques to get to that. So it just kind of, it helps boost your confidence as a reader, and it kind of reinforces the idea to the client when he or she sees the same message coming at them in a number of ways. So that's why I love these optional techniques, again, but they're optional so you don't have to choose to use them, and you may not use them in every instance, but I think they're nice to know. So going with the idea of knighting, knighting is similar to knighting in chess. And so what we do is we start with the Significator, and we look for cards that are, you know, 2 positions up and 1 position over from the Significator card. So going with that as the first way of looking at this, we have the Sun connected or knighting to the gentleman. So the Sun is a card that represents success, it represents confidence, it represents positive energy, and it represents illumination. So going with this idea here, we know that this is accurate because Howard is seeking to make this venture more successful. So that's one aspect of the Sun that's right there. And it also is that he was seeking illumination about how to move through the challenging time. So that mirrors what he was wanting to gain out of the experience in 2 ways. Now, another aspect of these shorter videos of this series is that people have been asking me about how do I read the cards in the houses. So I've been very mindful that in each one of these videos that I, you know, go into that a little more deeply than I had in my overall Grand Tableau video. So in this particular case, Sun is in the house of clouds, and so clouds represents things like confusion, uncertainty, being unsure of oneself, represents doubt. So I see this as the combination that it's allowing Howard to see that he has doubts about his confidence. So again, like part of the message here is about how can he become more confident in this, and also to how can he be more successful in this because he's having doubts about his level of success. So there's two things there. It's touching on the confidence issue and on the success issue, but looking at it from the idea that Sun is in the house of clouds. In a way, it's almost like it's spotlighting, like it's illuminating, like that is the issue and the concern here. So if we stripped everything away and got it down to its core, it's really a confidence issue, and it's really doubting his ability to be successful in that. So now with that, then it would offer the idea here, because the Sun is the most positive card in the deck. It outshines every single negative card, and it's going to do that in the case of being in the house of the clouds, because Sun is positive energy. So it would say for him to remember to be more positive in those moments when he's being doubtful. The thing about the clouds is clouds for me represent something that's temporary, something that's fleeting. So those moments of doubt may come, and they may come back quite often. It's not to say he's going to kind of totally eliminate them, but just remember that they're going to they're only going to be with him as long as he allows them to be there. You know, when he shifts his energy to becoming more positive, that would dissipate. So that's what I'm seeing with the Sun card. Then if we go the opposite way and we go up to and over one this way, we are now looking at the heart. And so the heart is a card of passion. It's a card of being enthusiastic. You know, I love this depiction of it because the heart has flames on it. So I always say, like, this is about your heart being on fire. So that's a good thing. So it shows that he's passionate about what he's doing. He's enthusiastic about it. His heart is on fire for it. And now here's the challenge, going with the idea of the house that it's placed in. This is in the house of the coffin. So the coffin for me represents something that has transitioned or changed. It can represent something that's being limited or restricted. So I would see this as, you know, saying that there's a possibility here that this challenge has now kind of limited or restricted his sense of passion and enthusiasm for it. It's kind of like a fire extinguisher being put on the fire that's there. So it's kind of like extinguishing the flame or extinguishing the passion. So it's acknowledging that. As a result, the heart can also be about the heart, and so about our feelings and our emotions, our emotional nature. In the house of the coffin, it could represent the possibility here of becoming emotionally closed off, or, you know, being emotionally shut down as a result of this. Like, you know, I tend to look at it in this day and age when people are talking about, I'm not feeling it. That's what I'm looking at here. So the possibility with the heart in the house of the coffin, just the idea of this, like, I'm not feeling it. So that's one way. So now we can go in a different direction. Another way of knighting is to go up one and over two. So if we do that, we can't do it on this side because there's not two cards, because there's only this one column here. So we can only go the one up, and over two this way. So now that brings us to ship. So now the ship represents journey. It represents advancement and progression, which again fits with his situation because he's getting his training, right? So that's again becoming more advanced in the skill, in the skill set. So that's positive to see. It represents progression. It represents adventure. So again, echoing the idea of this being a venture for him. I always see the ship as like exploring the possibilities. If you go with the idea, like, I'm thinking like, you know, back in the day when, you know, people actually traveled by ship, lots of them were explorers. And so they were exploring possibilities, you know, seeing what's out there. So, and, you know, looking at new land and you know, finding new territories to be in. So it could be maybe one of the things that may be helpful to him would be exploring new land, so to speak, you know, seeing, maybe going outside of the circle that he's in right now, maybe saying like, you know, broadening your horizons, you know, going beyond that. That's one way of looking at that. You know, this is in the house of the child, this card, the ship. And so the child is a great card in this respect because it echoes something new and starting something new. So again, this represents, you know, again, the venture being new, you know, just starting out in the venture. It could also be too, I'm looking at this because sometimes the ship can be something that's like foreign travel, like, you know, going overseas. So if we take the travel aspect out of it and just look at it as the foreign possibility, it could be that maybe part of the challenge for Howard is that the people that he's talking to or offering his services to are relatively new, going with the energy of the child, new to the concept of the Akashic Records. So they're new to it, and so having that sense of newness, they could see that as like being a foreign concept to them. And so if that is the case, if that is going to be his audience, it doesn't have to be his audience. He may want to look at that. So if he's getting a lot of new people who are new to the idea of Akashic Records, so there may be a little bit of education he has to do because it's still a foreign concept to them, and he has to explain that. So I'm seeing that kind of energy. And so one of the ways he could approach that would be, there's an acronym called KISS, which is Keep It Simple, Sweetheart. So the energy of child for me can represent simple and simplicity. So it could be like, how can he explain it in a way that a child would understand it? How can he explain it in a way that's really simple and easy to grasp? Because that might help with the idea of lowering that idea of it being a foreign concept thing. So two things I'm seeing with this. Number one, it could be him exploring possibilities, you know, widening that circle of in terms of people he's talking to. Again, it could also be about looking at the audience that he's talking to. Are they people who are new to the whole idea of the Akashic Records? And if so, that may require a whole different kind of conversation than it would be for people who know about the Akashic Records, know about the record keepers, that kind of thing. It reminds me of when I'm working with people in terms of my tarot readings, first thing I always ask them is, have you ever had your cards read before? And if they say no, that requires a whole different conversation than it would be if they had their cards read before. Because when I talk to people who have never experienced a tarot card reading, I kind of have to walk them through what the experience could possibly be. Whereas a person who's had their cards read, then usually the only distinction I have to make is how I read tarot versus how they may have experienced tarot readers in the past. Because every reader is different, and I always believe that's an important conversation to have. So it could be also be, since I'm saying that, it could be part of the conversation he also needs to have with clients who are experiencing an Akashic Records consult, because I also believe that no matter what the modality is, that every person who's a practitioner of it doesn't do it in the same way other practitioners do. And so you have to have the conversation about what your distinction is, what makes your approach different from the way everybody else does. Because people have expectations and preconceived notions based on a previous experience, and you want to kind of clear that up. So that was a lot coming from that one way of looking at that. And so the other way that we could typically look at knighting would be, we looked at going up and over on both sides, then we would look down and go over on both sides. So now we can't go down 2 spaces because there is no card here. And while I'm talking about this, we couldn't do it for another reason, and I didn't mention this in the last video, but these 4 cards here are what's considered out of tableau. When I did the diamonds in the previous video, I had a question come to me, and I believe that when one person has a question, other people have it and they just didn't ask it, so I'm going to address that now. These 4 cards don't play a part in any of the optional techniques because they are considered out of tableau. The tableau is actually the 32 cards that are here. So when you're doing all these techniques, this is the tableau. This is the energy that you want to focus on. These 4 cards are actually going to serve in another technique, and I'll get more to that at the end of this video. So that is why they are not a part of this. So, but if there was a card here, it would be considered out of tableau, so I couldn't do that anyway. So we couldn't go down 2 because there's no card here. So, and we can't go over 1 because there's no card here either. So we can't go that way. And we can't go down 2, again, because there's no card here, so we couldn't go over, because this card here, if we could, would be considered out of tableau. So I don't read the cards that are out of tableau when I'm doing the optional techniques. So the only way we could go is we can go down 1 and over 2. And so you may remember this placement. This is the whip, because I mentioned it in a previous video. The whip is about the ways in which we torture ourselves. I see this as torture. So it could be about Howard possibly beating himself up over the lack of response or interest that he's getting in terms of offering this service to other people. So he may be beating himself up. It could also be a card of, you know, training and discipline. So again, he is doing that. He is in the process of getting trained and certified for the next level up. So with that, and it could be too about him trying to whip himself into shape. And so that might not necessarily be a good thing. That may fall on the side of like beating himself up. But I see this in the positive sense about the training and the discipline, about becoming more disciplined in the process. Now, the whip is in the house of the lady. So I touched on this point before. And so now this is where we would reinforce that message again. So this in the house of the lady could suggest too there is a woman who is a trainer and who may be trying to whip Howard into shape. And she's doing it because that's just her mode. That's just how she comes across. It's just her energy. And he may be taking it a different way, because in that experience, it could be, the whip would be about being angry, you know, about getting hot, heated or hot. I call it like when I get angry, I say I'm getting hot. So it could be like getting heated, getting angry, that kind of thing. So it could be, again, reinforcing that idea like there's a woman, and the lady card is over here, and we talked on that in a previous video. There is a woman who, you know, he has underlying anger issues with, and it could be because of the fact that she is maybe being a little hard on him, but it could be like she's trying to whip him into shape because she sees his potential. You know, he could be, you know, looking at it from his side of the line and his feelings and his, you know, his thoughts and his feelings about it, and that's valid. I mean, that's okay. But he doesn't really know what her motivation is, and it could be because she may see his potential and really want him to excel. But the energy that she's coming across with is really rubbing him the wrong way. So I'm seeing that. So that is knighting. So a way you could do that too would be if there are topic cards, you know, cards outside of the significator in a grand tableau you want to look at, that would be another way of getting more information about that particular topic. But in this particular case, I wanted to keep the energy and the focus on the significator. So you always want to start with the significator first, because it's going to inform you more about the person having the reading done. And then you could look at the topics that they are bringing to the table. So that is knighting. In our next video in this series, this is where I'm going to use the 4 cards at the bottom, because I call this line the essence line. It's also known as the fate line or the destiny line. And so in our next video, I will be exploring a way of looking at what the essence line is, because its role in a grand tableau is to offer like final advice or to kind of punctuate what the whole entire story of the grand tableau is. So that will be our next video. So this is Jameson Mitchell signing off. I hope that you are finding this series informative and helpful. I appreciate the people who have taken the time to comment. I've had lots of people share, like they're writing the notes, they're taking notes and writing them down in their journals. They're actively working on these techniques in their own grand tableaus. That really warms my heart, because that was the intention behind this series. I learn, my personal learning styles, I learn by demonstration, and I hope by demonstrating this, it inspires you and motivates you in your own work with the Lenormand. So again, this is Jameson Mitchell signing off, and until our next video together, I wish you well and take care.